Midnight Suns might just be my new addiction. It's a really weird game. A fantastic, surprising, dense, ridiculous, weird game. I've played both of the Firaxis XCOM games a fair bit, and I was keen to pick this up since before it released, but I just never did. Now that it's free on PS Plus Extra, and I've remembered it exists, I've been having an absolute blast. Yes, I'm playing it on PS5. I'm poor and I don't want to pay to play it on PC. And this was before it was free on Epic Games, sue me. Is it a perfect game? No. But it feels like a game made specifically for me, even though I didn't know I wanted it. I know I talk a lot about things I don't like on this channel, which ends up being just a fair amount of complaining, but this time, I'm excited to say I have almost entirely positive things to say about this strange, unexpectedly delightful game. So, thank you for indulging me. So, what is it? Well, first of all, it's liking this video and subscribing to the channel. That's the most important part of this game. But once you've done that, it's a turn-based deck-building strategy game. But it's also a slice-of-life friendship sim. But it's also about fashion. But it's also a base builder. A little XCOM, a little Slay the Spire, a little Persona, a little The Sims, a little Bratz Rock Angels, and a little Mass Effect. It wears a lot of hats. Almost as many as the characters in the game. And I can see how that would be too much or too scattered or just too weird for some people, but I was hooked almost immediately. From the tutorial, you know you're in for a unique experience, for better or for worse. The elements themselves aren't super groundbreaking on their own, but who would have thought to combine them all like this? Firaxis, you absolute madmen. Let's talk about what makes this game so different, and I'm afraid you'll just have to bear with me. There's a lot of basic overview information to get through before I can unashamedly gush about how much I love this game. If you've played before and already know the things I'm about to explain, then please enjoy judging the footage I've chosen for my B-roll and my unoptimized builds. So how does this game work? Well, it's primarily a deck-building card game. I know it doesn't necessarily look that way, but that's because everything else is cleverly built upon this rock-solid base. You have a roster of literally colourful and varied heroes, led by your character, the Hunter. I say the Hunter is yours not only because you'll be controlling exclusively them outside of combat, but also because there is a character creator at the start of the game. Naturally, as any man would, I immediately made Hunter into my fiancé. Or close to. Every character has a deck of 8 cards, no more, no less. There are 3 types of cards these decks are built with. Attacks, which are fairly self-explanatory, skills for utility like healing, buffs, card draw, or card augmentation, and heroics for powerful abilities, usually emblematic of the particular hero's moveset or theme. You have 3 card plays per turn spread out across a maximum of 3 heroes you bring on missions. With every hero having different strengths and weaknesses, and usually more than 3 cards in hand, this forces tactical decision making, not only in the combat encounters themselves, but also in deck building. Heroic cards, in addition to costing a card play, also require you to spend heroism, generated by skills and attacks. Another resource to keep track of and play around. Will you use Captain Marvel's Fists of Radiance this turn, or save your heroism to use an even better one next turn? As usual with deck builders, there are rules to how you can build your deck. You must have at least 1 of each type of card, a maximum of 4 of any type, and only 2 copies of the same card. In addition to card types, there are also card rarities. In the familiar naming and colour scheme, you have white commons, blue rares, purple epics, and orange legendaries. No points for originality there, but they earn them back everywhere else. Generally, as you'd expect, the higher the rarity, the more powerful the card. So, how do you get these cards? You get them from gamma coils, doing hero ops, and completing friendship requests. We'll get to those in a sec, I promise, but for now it's enough to know that you'll end up with a lot of cards to choose from, so you'll have to do some experimentation to see what niche you want each hero to fill. I had so much fun playing around with different deck possibilities, trying new cards, and theory crafting possible builds for each hero. What can I say? I used to be obsessed with Magic the Gathering. You should have guessed that already. As I said, each hero has a different set of cards to use in deck building and combat, and they're differentiated by the lifeblood of any card game, keywords. Beautiful, wonderful, sexy keywords. There's a lot to learn, and I won't go through them all, but there are a few central ones. There's Quick, which refunds a card play if you KO someone with it, obviously very useful for clearing small enemies. There's Knockback, which knocks people back, which again can be used to clear small enemies or potentially knock higher health enemies into drops. There's Free, which doesn't cost a card play. They can apply Marked, which also refunds a card play on KO. Vulnerable, which increases damage against a target. Weak, which decreases their damage, and so many more keywords and effects from cards. If we look at Magic, her kit is built around creating portals for free, using knockback to push enemies through them, and basically just repositioning enemies on the field so other card plays or environmental attacks can be more effective. Then you have Iron Man, who utilizes the redraw mechanic, usually used to simply redraw cards, to empower his abilities, whether that be buffing his allies with block, debuffing enemies with marked and vulnerable, or simply dealing damage. There's some really unique card combinations you can play around with, especially if you have the DLCs. There's Blade and his bleed attacks, Storm and her cards that gain power in your hand, Venom and his ravenous hunger for flesh. You also get given hero combo cards each mission, where two of your heroes team up to deal massive damage to a single target and get bonus effects depending on which heroes are involved. Hunter is a bit different because you can build her in a couple of ways. Yeah, my Hunter was female, so I'll be saying her from now on. She has a few different potential builds, mostly revolving around whether you've gone light, dark, or balanced. Light cards tend to have more stereotypical light themes like healing or buffs, and dark cards tend to be more damage based. You gain points in light or dark by playing their respective cards in combat, but also in other ways we'll talk about later. It doesn't affect much, but it's nice to have another option for playstyle with your custom character. It sounds like a lot when I just blurt it out to you like this with little context, but I can assure you it is quite addictive. Figuring out the optimal play to clear a bunch of grunts with quick cards or KO a big target before he bashes Dr. Spooky right in his little goatee is a tactical affair that feels really rewarding when you get it right, and not too punishing when you get it wrong. This isn't XCOM. You can't take Carol on a mission, get her killed, then not see her for the rest of the game. The worst that can happen is you fail the mission and have to restart, or you get a lesser reward for having some of your heroes KO'd during the fight. The limited amount of card plays per turn, limited card draw, and usually overwhelming amount of enemies means that you have to weigh your priorities carefully. Until you get to late game, you won't be able to clear everything in 1 or 2 turns, so you'll have to make some compromises. All this to say, it's a really well balanced game, made all the more so by the ability to change difficulty at any time. If you're after a more casual experience, you can stay at a low difficulty the whole way through and enjoy tearing your way through Hydra and Lilin to your heart's content. If you want a challenge, however, you can keep raising it up whenever you unlock new difficulties and really feel the enemy forces getting more powerful. Combat feels tight, well designed, and not bogged down by unnecessary bloat or length. Every mission can realistically be completed in under 10 minutes, so you're able to hop in for half an hour and still get things done if you want to. There are also very few luck-based cards or abilities. Nico Minoru has a whole set of cards based around randomized effects, amount of damage, or targets, but even then it never feels unfair, and you can play around them to set these effects up. Thankfully, this also means that you don't get the same feeling you do in XCOM, where your high-ranked soldier is staring down an alien 5 feet from the barrel of their gun with a 95% chance to hit, and still fails miserably. Okay, so it happens, but not often, I swear. There's a lot more to combat than just the cards themselves, but we're not even done with this section yet. Between missions, you can upgrade your cards if you have an extra unequipped copy, increasing damage of attacks, making knockback into forceful knockback, or increasing the amount of heroism gained. You can also add modifiers to already upgraded cards, perhaps giving you health if you redraw it, or giving a chance to apply vulnerable, or increasing the damage to full health foes. Each time you modify a card, you get to choose from 3 options, randomly chosen from a larger pool. If you have enough credits, you can even re-roll these modifiers until you get the one that you were really looking for. So that's pretty much the Slay the Spire component of the game. It's not an exact comparison, but there aren't many better ones. As I said, I love this card-based system. Of course I do, I'm a sucker for cards in the first place. I love Hearthstone and Magic and Slay the Spire. There's something very gratifying about opening a Gamma Coil to see a new powerful card you haven't tried before and then using it to wreck those Hydra goons. I think this would appeal to anyone who enjoys tactical card games, but also anyone who's looking for a fresh spin on a turn-based game in general. These cards are just a way to introduce another element to turn-based combat. So if you enjoy Baldur's Gate 3, or Divinity, or XCOM, then I would say you should give this a go. Let's talk about the rest of combat, shall we? Wait, first I have to give a special shout out to Bladestorm. I love that card so much, and its animation is sick. Okay, now I'm done. As I'm sure you cunningly spied in my previous footage, these cards aren't being used in a vacuum. In fact, I'm fairly certain there's not a single vacuum in the entire Abbey. Maybe Doctor Strange has a cleaning spell. My point is, you're fighting enemies in places. Revolutionary, I know, but it's not that simple. Every combat arena is fairly small and filled with various environmental features that heroes can use against the enemies. There are small objects to be thrown, conduits that stun, large objects to be shoved, platforms to launch off, poles to tip over, barrels to blow up, and ledges to throw people off, if you're lucky. These all cost heroism to use, so sometimes when you're out of card plays but you've got some heroism left over, you can use the environment to finish off low health enemies or stun them to avoid their next attack. It's a nice touch that adds yet another level of strategy and planning. Spider-Man is particularly adept at using the environment, with many cards increasing environmental attack damage or reducing heroism cost. Since every arena has many of these options, I reckon Spider-Man's pretty strong. Also, he's voiced by Yuri Lowenthal, so that's pretty great. You also have moves, which can be used to literally move a hero to a different part of the arena, or to shove an enemy, especially useful against these minions with no health bar. These guys are KO'd by any damage at all, so shoving one into another will KO them both. Minions are prime targets for AoE and quick cards, where taking them out can be essentially completely free. But what about the rest of the enemies? Well, at the start of the game, you'll mostly be facing Hydra soldiers. Some of them shoot at you, some of them use their batons to stun you, some of them use energy whips to slow you, and some of them have these big stupid fucking shields and block objectives and other enemies like the big dumb fucking they are. They can heal each other, they can make each other blow up, and they can give each other frenzy, which allows them to attack after a certain amount of cards are played, not just on their turn. At first I thought the enemy variety in this game was seriously lacking, but as it turns out, I was just so addicted to combat and the general gameplay loop that I hadn't progressed the story enough to get to Act 2, where there are more Lilin, or Children of Lilith, the game's main antagonist. They're different again, with little hellhounds, these guys that split in two after taking damage, ritual witches who summon more enemies, and for fuck's sake, more big bastards and their stupid shields. What are they protecting? Well, there are also these nest mothers that act as mini bosses and summon altars you have to destroy. Each one you destroy damages the nest mother. They're actually pretty easy, I just hate dealing with enemies protecting each other. There are also vampires, with a Y, from the DLC. It's very important that these vampires have a Y, and not an I. You don't understand. When they attack, they can make your cards apply bleed to your own heroes, which is a really cool mechanic. There are also the soulless who you can choose to fight in the threat room. The different enemy types offer different challenges and force you to think of different strategies, which of course is the whole point of having enemy variety. They also allow different heroes to shine, meaning you can explore more of your roster depending on who you're up against. Then there are more powerful named enemies that act as bosses throughout the game, sometimes dropping into missions at random to make encounters that much harder. There's enhanced that have fallen to Lilith, like Venom and Scarlet Witch. There's Lilin like these giant dread maidens, and then there's Crossbones. They're all powerful in their own right, and they get a bunch of advantages over regular enemies. Some can attack more than once, they can't be knocked off ledges or into drops, they often have multiple lives, and unlike other enemies, you don't know who they're going to attack next. I really enjoyed fighting these mini-bosses. They all have unique individual mechanics that make things harder without being unfair, and they look really imposing on the battlefield, often being several times larger than the other enemies. If you're plowing through the story, you're unlikely to get bored of facing certain types of enemies, but I can absolutely see an argument for it becoming repetitive if you're grinding a fair bit like I did. Then again, that's a fairly self-imposed situation, so it's not a huge problem. Both sides can have and impose a whole suite of effects. Some I mentioned before, but there are more. Resist is particularly useful, as it lets you negate the damage of the next attack. I mentioned that these shield dickheads have block, but our heroes can have block too. And in fact, Captain America's deck kind of revolves around getting and giving block. Makes sense, he's got a bloody shield too, doesn't he? The missions themselves have a fair bit of variety too, and you're not always just running in to kill everyone in the room and go home for a smoke. You have to retrieve intel, capture targets, protect objects of interest, take down big bosses, and a whole bunch more. Story missions often introduce even more secondary objectives to this list as well. You can see what type of mission it is from the mirror table before you launch it anyway, so the choice is yours. So that's the streamlined overview of combat in Midnight Suns. There's a lot to it, especially when I just word vomited at you at the start of a video, but it all fits together so nicely that after a few hours you don't even have to think about it. All this to say, I love the way that combat evolves and shifts throughout the game. Later story missions know that you've been playing for a fair while, so they really change it up, giving you harder objectives or combining mechanics in new ways. While it's not perfect, you can tell that so many hours went into designing, curating, testing, and balancing the combat scenarios. It's a meticulously crafted experience that I found incredibly satisfying. If you're not a fan of turn-based games, or if the card-based system I've described sounds boring, then this is definitely not the game for you. I acknowledge that even the core combat of this game makes it fairly niche, and while I think that it's an absolute blast, there are plenty of people who prefer a faster-paced style. I also think that it's different enough from the Firaxis XCOM games to have deterred some fans of those from jumping into this. Which is unfortunate because it's got that same depth of strategy and planning, and even a similar feeling of downtime between missions. Let's talk about that. The Abbey. The Abbey. It's beautiful, it's calm, it's huge, and it's full of mysteries ready to be unraveled. It's hidden away in a pocket dimension in Salem, Massachusetts, so you're safe from your demon mother and your weird extended family. This is where you'll be spending your time between battling Hydra and the Lilin, and there's a lot to do. First of all, this is where all of your deck building and card pack opening happens. Okay, so it's not quite like cracking the seal on a fresh Magic the Gathering booster, but watching Tony open Gamma Coils is satisfying in its own way. This happens in the Forge, which is powered by a demon, by the way, and is also where Doctor Strange has set up his artifact study area. You can take artifacts you earn on missions to him for rewards, and you can also conduct research for the benefit of the team. Extra combat items, extra areas in the Abbey, suits for the Hunter, there's dozens of upgrades to pursue. The area itself is filled with Doctor Strange and Iron Man paraphernalia, and only gets more so as you upgrade it. It's a nice visual touch that when you purchase an improvement for an area, the game adds onto it, and by the end, if you've got them all, the Abbey looks completely different from how it started. The other areas all have their individual purposes too. Carol's War Room decrypts intel caches and uses them for hero ops, which reward cards for the hero you send on them. The Yard is Blade's domain, where you can spar with your fellow heroes for combat and friendship bonuses. We'll get to friendship soon, I promise. We don't have time for friends right now. The Yard is also where you both upgrade and mod your cards, augmenting your decks to better suit your playstyle, or simply increasing your firepower to deal with harder enemies. The DLC adds extra upgrades for some of these areas too, such as Morbius and his laboratory in the Forge, where you can alter hero stats for a small fee. Once everywhere is fully upgraded, you'll find there's even more options for you between missions, like the Threat Room where you can level up your heroes, the Book of Vishanti which allows you to craft specific cards, and even an item bench where you can create combat items to take with you. Even Hunter's Room gets a glow up if you upgrade the furniture. This isn't a comprehensive list, but you get the idea. There's a lot that goes into preparing for missions, far more than just picking your cards and rolling out. It doesn't stop there though. The Abbey grounds have a lot in store for players willing to explore. It's completely optional past a certain point, but I never rest until every corner of a game map is uncovered, so I explored as much as I could, as soon as I could. You're aided in this endeavour by the ghost of Agatha Harkness, who was killed accidentally by Scarlet Witch. It's a whole thing, you had to be there. She helps you activate shrines, points you towards challenges to access words of power and open up more of the map, and provides context for many of the mysterious locations around the ground. Okay, what are words of power and how do they help you explore? Well, there are 4 magical abilities from the 4 gods that Hunter can unlock. The first one is Open, which opens magically sealed doorways. The next is Reveal, which can show you hidden bridges or resources. Then there's Purify, which gets rid of these tendrils of corruption to open up passages or allow access to chests. And lastly, we have Break, which does what it says on the tin and destroys obstacles to let you through. You don't gain these abilities all at once, you have to earn them at shrines accessed with moon seals and unlocked by completing challenges. Okay, so there's a fair bit to exploring as well. Only once you have all 4 words of power can you fully explore every area on the Abbey grounds. This exploration, as optional and low stakes as it is, might not be for everyone. To be fair, it is a bit jarring at first. I can absolutely see why some people might skip it to get back to the main story and combat, but god, I loved it. I like a bit of downtime in between missions, and I feel like this is almost exactly what XCOM was lacking. A bit more of a personal touch at your HQ to make it feel like more of a change of pace, but also a more hands-on experience. As I said before, the environments are gorgeous. There's a lot of variance between the areas. There are these strange mysteries to be interacted with, and there are a bunch of different plants to collect. Oh yeah, it's also a foraging game. This part is extra non-essential, but you can collect different plants in different regions to be used at Agatha's Cauldron. Here you can make combat items, gifts for friends, and exchange some resources for others. You also use these plant reagents for other friend-related things, but we'll get there. God, you're impatient to have some friends, aren't you? There are some areas of the Abbey grounds that are really quite important to understanding the full backstory of Hunter, Lilith, and the Caretaker, so you're sort of missing out if you don't do at least a little bit of exploring. Robbie and Peter's shop is also completely separated from the Abbey itself, so it's not like the main cast and story are all self-contained with only useless tidbits out in the wild. In fact, there's quite a mix of environmental storytelling. There's the classic journal pages and notes to find, which give you a bit of context and count towards collections for rewards, but there's also unexplained objects and events that you just have to figure out for yourself, or simple visual clues to let you know where Hunter's been before she died, or where Wanda managed to get to in her exploration of the grounds. It helps that Hunter moves really fast outside of the Abbey itself, so I personally never felt like exploring was a tedious endeavour. I merrily skipped through the paths collecting these flowers like the fearsome warrior I am. My only gripe with her movement is the fact that you can't jump. I know it's not super necessary in this game, but I keep getting stuck on these stupid tiny rocks and minuscule inclines, so just let me jump over them, goddammit. You can also fast travel to each specific region, cutting your travel time down even further. I think that this expansive map gives the Abbey a really authentic, lived-in feel. I know not everyone will actually see the whole thing, but it's an immersive and gratifying touch for people who enjoy the more base-building, comprehensive exploration, or even just a change of pace and some variety in visuals. As you explore, you'll find 2 more things of note. The first is Havens, where you can invite your heroic friends to hang out for specific activities, and the second are chests. These chests have different rarities, and depending on your arcane level, you can open the lower tiers for free, while spending arcane keys to open the others. These chests contain the real core of the game, the mechanic everything else is built around, the thing you all came here for, costumes. They're satisfying to open, as all good chests are, but I think it's finally time to talk about the heroes themselves. What good would a home base be if it wasn't populated with a cast of literally and figuratively colourful characters to hang out with? There's some familiar faces like Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, Carol Danvers, and more, but there's quite a few that I didn't recognise. That might be because I'm a total virgin when it comes to comic books and Marvel media that isn't the MCU. I'm sure other people know all about them. Robbie Reyes, Nico Minoru, Ilyana Rasputin. I loved meeting them, seeing their personalities develop, testing their abilities, and just interacting with them in general. The writing really differentiates the characters far beyond their superficial or superpowered differences. You start with a fair few heroes, but you have to recruit others as you progress through the story, like Wolverine, Captain America, and Spider-Man. This goes for the DLC too. If you purchase the DLC characters, you have to go on a mission to recruit them, and they each have their own individual storylines. We'll go more into it later, but let me say right now that they are worth it. So, what do you actually do with these characters when you're not in a mission? Well, the Abbey isn't just somewhere you collect ingredients and sleep. The other characters are here too, hanging out by the pool, training, doing reconnaissance for the team, researching upgrades. There's so much dynamism in the NPC activities. you'll rarely find the same character in the same place 2 days in a row. It gives the Abbey a homey feel and adds to the sense of realism as you do your daily rounds. You can talk to them at any point, and when they have something to say, you'll get to have actual dialogue with them, RPG style with multiple choices for Hunter's responses. You can also choose to join specific heroes for hangouts after missions. You get to choose the activity, Hunter's dialogue, and at the end you even get to choose a little present as a thank you for not completely negging you. It sounds a little pathetic on paper, but it works. All of these choices can affect your friendship level with the character in question. They all have preferred activities, gifts, and even light or dark dialogue options. Wolverine loves fishing and candles that smell like bones? So take him fishing, then give him this weird bone candle and you'll get the best friendship results. The dialogue bonuses are less cut and dry, and there are few hard and fast rules. Choosing only light or only dark dialogue options will make some characters happy, but will inevitably piss off some others. Captain America, the goody two-boat-sized shoes as he is, eats up all the positivity you feed him, but Magic is almost as edgy as her Phoenix 5 skin, so she wants you to brood with her. You have an individual friendship level with every character in your roster, as well as an overall team friendship level. As you level up individual friendships, the heroes get passive bonuses in combat. As you level up your overall group bond, you unlock heroic combo cards and compliments? This is a weird game, but mechanically you are strongest when you have higher friendship levels, so the real treasure actually is the friends you made along the way. Tony Stark has even created Superlink, a social media platform just for the superheroes in the Abbey. This was a nice touch too. You can see the things your fellow heroes have posted about the outside world, and you get invited to hangouts when your friendship level increases. If you really want to boost your friendship levels, you can also take them on little friendship dates during the daytime to havens you find whilst exploring the grounds. These are one-time uses though, so you'd better think hard about exactly who you want to take to hang out at the graveyard. Maybe not Peter, he sounds too happy-go-lucky for that. Speaking of how the characters sound, look, it's the best segue I could come up with on the fly, alright? Just shut up and watch. The voice acting is great. The voices all fit the characters so well, and the performances are top tier. The only exception I have is Hunter. She's good most of the time, but every now and then she sounds a little stiff and monotonous.
What is your catchphrase? It is time to morb?
I know that's part of her character, but it was still noticeable. I'm also aware that it might be different for male Hunter, but I have yet to try him out, so I'm not so sure. Also, Tony Stark sounds close to RDJ, but not quite. It's kind of distracting. No one else is mimicking their MCU counterpart.
Or worse, they toy with vanity projects so they can lob cars at Venus.
Yeah, get f***ed, Elon. The characters all play significant parts in the story at different moments, some regardless of how much or little you use them. Everyone gets a chance to shine, but if you prefer a few heroes over the others, you can spend most of your Abbey time with them instead. That being said, I found all of the characters interesting anyway, so I wanted to hear about their pasts and struggles and contributions to the team. The DLC characters slot in really well too. They have separate storylines that start to connect and converge as you go on, and their personalities fit well into the teams. Deadpool is hit and miss for me, but the rest were pretty interesting. There's also some cute little clubs that you can join to have semi-regular hangouts after missions. Emo kids are trying to figure out how Hunter died. Shop class is designing combat items to help against supervillains and other strong enemies. And book club is Blade's attempt to put the literary riz on Captain Marvel. Stop third-wheeling, Steve. These were some cute little bits of story information interspersed with character drama and, of course, a bit of wholesome yet terrible flirtation. Do they get together? Guess you'll have to play it and find out. I wasn't expecting to, but I actually love this friendship mechanic and all the little opportunities for character interaction. It let me play into the role-playing aspect a lot more, and I enjoyed the lack of urgency at the Abbey. It felt like somewhere I would actually want to hang out, and learning about all my teammates really made the story beats more impactful. It also felt like even the little hero chats mattered. There are tensions between the Avengers and the Midnight Suns that it's up to you to resolve, and there are little moments where you can help heroes for rewards, and gaining your teammates' trust shows in gameplay as well as dialogue. The characters also interact with each other, not just the Hunter. It's these extra touches that Firaxis have added that really gives this game that organic quality I really lost myself in. They may not seem like much on their own, but when you add them all up, it's immersive as hell. Also, Nico made Hunter watch The Room, and That's just a great piece of lore. Again, I know that this will definitely be a boring slog for some people, but I was invested in these characters fairly quickly. I will admit though, that while there is some good humour in here, there's a lot of what I would call standard Marvel quippiness, where everyone kind of jokes about everything sometimes. That can be a little groan-worthy, as can some of the more hunter-centric dialogue. People tell you rather quickly how much they love you and your leadership, and how they look up to you and how you've changed their lives. I get it, I'm the main character, but I don't need this level of admiration from everybody. It's a little patronising. Usually though, the dialogue is compelling and engaging. Okay, I've made you wait long enough. It's fashion time. Casual Abby outfits, combat suits, swimwear, colour schemes, it's all here. You can earn Abby outfits from hangouts, unlock palettes for existing costumes with gloss, and get the coveted Midnight Sun suits from special hero-specific challenges. These Abby outfits reflect the characters that wear them, and there are even some cute club shirts to show your loyalty to certain groups. Unlocking and choosing these casual clothes for the heroes is a nice touch for some cozy realism, but what's even better is that you can set these to change daily. It's such a small detail, but I really appreciate it, and I think it brings a certain quality of life. If you've bought the clothes, you want to see the clothes, right? It does remove a little bit of the relatability though, because on days when I'm editing, I absolutely do just roll out of bed and put on the same pair of sweatpants, but I guess I'm not trying to save the world from Lilith. Or at least, I'm not trying very hard. You can also set the combat suits to change daily, and this is where the fun begins. There are iconic suits from the comics, goofy medieval variations, and badass futuristic outfits to deck your heroes out in. But, as I mentioned before, within these options you also get a bunch of palettes to choose from, recoloring each outfit for some gloss and keeping the looks fresh. Some are better than others, but more variation is nice. Pretty good, right? But wait, there's more! Hunter doesn't just have Abby outfit and combat suit variation, she has customization in pretty much everything. Hair color, hair highlight color, hair root color, skin tone, eye color, makeup, face sigils. It's insane. She has vastly more outfit options than the other heroes for both combat and casual scenarios. Some of them are better than others and probably better smelling than others, but it's exciting to unlock them all the same. You can customize your combat suits too, not just with color palettes like the others. You can change which swords Hunter wields, you can wear masks of various styles, you can make Hunter's hair and makeup different for combat and the Abbey. It might sound silly to be talking so much about cosmetics and customization, and I really didn't expect to care about this part of the game, but it was genuinely quite exciting to play into that aspect of the superhero experience. A supersuit is a big part of the genre and the whole superhero conceit, right? Spider-Man has like a dozen just in live action, Iron Man has multiple every movie, Batman upgrades his all the time, and even the Incredibles make a big deal out of it. So I really like that you have so much choice about how you deck out your Hunter. It's also kind of funny to see two heroes looking badass and slick and cool, and then Blade's just over here looking like a total loser with his dumbass male coif. Good stuff. I think this feature will appeal to pretty much everyone who plays it, but you don't have to engage with the system at all if you don't want to. Looking cool confers no mechanical advantage, as much as I wish it did. I'll do it for Axis, I'll coordinate these team outfits like it's no one's business. Is a reward too much to ask? I spent way too much time customizing Hunter's outfits. What's wrong with me? I'm also aware of a pervasive bug where completing all the mysteries at the Abbey, then opening the chest in question, doesn't reward you with the ancestral armor it's supposed to. I know of this bug because it happened to me too, so that kinda sucks. Ah well. I like that the outfits stay consistent during cutscenes. Again, another small touch, but one that some games still fail to implement, and that sometimes yanks me out of the moment. Speaking of cutscenes, let's talk about the story. Oh yeah, fashion time is over, we can cut the music now. I will admit that overall, it's no Hugo Award winner. You're not going to have that moment of silent contemplation where you just sit and watch the credits roll, absorbing the story like you would in Red Dead 2. Or maybe you are, I won't tell you how to live your life. My point is, if you've seen other superhero stories before, this one is pretty standard fare. Lilith Your mum has just been resurrected. That's bad. The Midnight Sun is coming. The Avengers fight her at Sanctum Sanctorum, but it's the beginning of a story, not the end, so they suck again. They bravely run away while Wanda stays behind to keep the lights on. Rip. They end up at the Abbey where they meet the Midnight Suns and resurrect you, the Hunter. That's good. You killed Lilith before, so it should be a piece of cake. You go back to the Sanctum and it turns out that thing I said about the cake was a lie. Venom messes you up, you meet Spider-Man, you kidnap this Faustus bloke that wants to be your new stepdad, but Crossbones puts him down before he can spill the beans. Also, you've been locked out of Stranger's clubhouse because you're not cool enough. Lilith captures both Wanda and Bruce Banner, corrupting them to fight for her cause. Much of the game is spent figuring out how to move against Lilith, how to uncorrupt Wanda and Bruce, and how to stop her from bringing the dark god Chthon to the table. Along the way, you meet Wolverine and Sabretooth, the original Ghost Rider, Johnny Blaze, and even the sexily voiced Mephisto. The turns and reveals in the story aren't particularly surprising, nor are they so wacky as to elevate the entire narrative, but I don't think I want to spoil them here by summarizing the entire plot. I know that's a little out of character for me, but I think that if anything I've said so far about this game sounds interesting, you should check it out for yourself, and I don't want to ruin that for you. I said the story was standard, but it's not bad by any means. It sets up plenty of mysteries to explore and gives pretty good incentives to go beyond just the main quest lines. How did you defeat Lilith? What does she want? What is this collar Hunter wears? Why didn't this game do well? Okay, I think I know the answer to that mystery, but we'll talk about it later. Each hero has a chance to shine and be a part of the tale. The villains are suitably villainous, and I enjoyed seeing the character relationships unfold and shape the wider events. I don't think anyone should go into this specifically for the story, and I don't think that anyone who's played this is going to list the story as their favourite part, but it's perfectly serviceable for the medium. It reminded me a lot of the MCU, for better or for worse, even down to the sense of humour. The DLC stories are handled quite well, I think, and they fit perfectly into the tone and feel of the base game. Speaking of the tone, I loved it. I really enjoyed that dark, creepy, occult vibe they had going, and they managed to do a pretty good job of fitting the characters to this mold too, regardless of how mismatched they might have initially seemed. I mentioned the Abbey looks beautiful. It does. The environments are lush and inviting. The interior is cozy and filled with visually interesting equipment. It has 23 bedrooms and a pool, so it's perfect for a frat house. It doesn't have a bathroom or a kitchen, but I'm sure the Forge could double as both. The combat arenas look great too. The different areas all have different themes and backdrops, and given that you're not really interacting with them, they're hard to mess up. Not much to say about them really, except that this is the most stereotypically New York depiction of New York I've ever seen. The costumes and cosmetics look just as good. They're detailed and textured, they're vibrant, and they're shiny. No complaints here. Firaxis knew that this was going to be a big part of the game, and they put the effort into making them graphically impressive. The combat animations are all flashy and unique, lending a lot of weight to each card play, and adding to the difference in style and feel between each character. Venom is weird and unsettling, Iron Man is clean and slick, and Ghost Rider is very noticeable. It's nice to have such distinct looks for each hero's moveset, and that goes for the enemies too. The Lilith's attacks look different to Hydra's, which look different to the Soulless. Now I have to praise the cutscenes. Some games, not naming names here, think that static shots of scenery or almost equally static characters are enough. But not Midnight Suns. The characters are moving, they're interacting with one another and the environment. The cutscenes themselves are happening in a bunch of different locations. And most importantly, there's some honest to God great cinematography. It's interesting, it's engaging, and it's really well balanced. It doesn't cut so often that it looks like they're taking the piss or you're watching Taken 3, but it doesn't linger on any one shot so long that you get bored. I love it when games make the effort to do this. I love it. I think it shows a certain level of care and effort that isn't strictly necessary, but makes cutscenes just that much more pleasant to watch. And there are a fair few cutscenes, so thank God. I do have some graphical complaints though. You might have already caught a glimpse of it in this video, but the facial animations are far more Mass Effect Andromeda than they are God of War Ragnarok. The heroes' faces look stiff at best and plasticky at worst, and it's not enough to ruin the game or the cutscenes for me, but damn, Pete, did the spider give you its good looks as well as its web-spinning powers? Truly a face only an aunt could love. Also, Tony, your mustache looks like someone shaved Emilia Clarke's eyebrow and stuck it on your upper lip. Another, admittedly small complaint I have is about the card art. It feels a little uninspired. It's basically just scaled down images of the character models themselves with parts of their animations. They could have really leaned into a comic art style or something a little more visually distinct from the rest of the game, but no. Kinda disappointing. There's also a weird, consistent visual glitch where Hunter's hero portrait just wouldn't load most of the time. I could see everyone else's just fine, but it was like Hunter had just stepped out of her frame like a Harry Potter painting, because it was almost always blank. The only other visual glitch I noticed was that at one point the entirety of the world outside the Abbey was completely messed up, but I reloaded and it was okay. Finally, I did have some moments of poor frame rate, but they were few and far between. The only thing that did it consistently was playing air superiority as Iron Man, where he shoots out a ton of missiles. I assume the game just couldn't quite handle that much movement on screen. As I said, I played this on PS5 for budgetary and comfort reasons, so I'm sure that this isn't an issue on PCs with decent specs, but it was certainly noticeable when it happened to me. Overall, it's a good looking and flashy game that integrates that comic book style and colour palette really well. It's not photorealistic and the faces are truly something to behold, but I thought it was graphically consistent and shone where it needed to. Now, sound design. This game sounds like a Marvel movie. Every punch, every strike, every explosion, energy beam, gunshot, thud, and crash has so much weight because of the great sound effects. I cannot praise the audio team enough. They absolutely killed it with Midnight Suns. I genuinely have no complaints. I already mentioned the great voice acting performances, but everything is mixed in so perfectly for immersion and satisfaction in the Abbey, in missions, and in cutscenes. Even just exploring the grounds with your words of power brings some hefty spell sound effects. So good. The score is every bit as impressive as the SFX. It's an absolute joy to listen to. Familiar in a genre sense, but not derivative. It's dramatic, it's wondrous, it's thrilling, it's emotional, and all in the perfect moments. I never felt a mismatch of tone with this score, and I never got bored of hearing it. I have no more notes for this. The game sounds fantastic, and no one can deny it. It's extremely impressive to me how well this game conveys the fantasy of being Iron Man, of being Ghost Rider, Captain Marvel, Wolverine. It's a card game. It shouldn't feel this good or this immersive or well cemented into the Marvel world, but it does. The deck building, the variety of approaches to combat, the time spent with heroes between missions, the customization, all of this feeds into this feeling that Midnight Suns is a love letter to these characters and the comics themselves. I may not be a comic expert, but I don't have to be to tell that Firaxis have a deep respect and fondness for their source material. It's a niche game that scratches a very specific itch. It has the tactical combat satisfaction of XCOM and the social considerations of Baldur's Gate 3. Okay, so maybe the Midnight Suns and Avengers aren't quite as deep or interactive as Shadowheart and Astarion, but these two games are the only ones I've ever completed a playthrough, then immediately started another within the same hour. Another factor I think it has going for it is that it's a little more casual than XCOM. I love the unforgiving nature of those games and how the odds feel against you so often, but it's also nice to be able to choose how hard you want combat to be from moment to moment, and to know that you can't mess up an entire run with bad luck on a singular mission. So it has so many moving parts, and while I know that they can turn some people off, the game was received pretty well. 83 on Metacritic, 82% positive on Steam. Those are good numbers, but it sold really poorly. I think that it was too different from their last games to fully appeal to XCOM players, and too out there in general to fully appeal to Marvel Comics fans. Also, it's turn-based, which locks some people out instantly. That's sad, but I get why this didn't have a huge release. I didn't even play it until 18 months later, and only then because it was free. That being said, if some or most of these design components appeal to you, I highly recommend you giving Midnight Suns a try. I bought the DLC just a few hours in because I was already hooked, and it was worth every cent. Unlike with Biomutant, I played this game so much more than necessary. I could have just mainlined the story and maybe the DLCs to give a fair overview of the game, but I ended up playing nearly 100 hours because the gameplay loop was so addictive to me. I regret not giving this a try earlier than I did, because while it sounds so weird on paper, the final game is a genuine treat from start to finish. Huge props to Firaxis for trying something so different, and for sticking to such a unique vision. Also, you can pet both the dog and the cat. Game of the century. Thank you all for watching and subscribing to the channel. I had a lot of fun making this one. If you've played Midnight Suns and have any thoughts, feel free to leave them below. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.